What would you do if the man you just married stood up on your wedding night after years of saying he couldn't walk? They said it was the kind of wedding that, not because it was lavish, though it was, not because the bride was beautiful, though she was, but because it was rare to see love where so much pain had existed before. Amara Johnson stood at the end of the aisle, her ivory dress falling like liquid satin to the she wasn't marrying a man of convenience. She was marrying a man who had once lost everything. And yet here he was, Sebastian Cole, the recluse. Now he was back, quiet, older, slower, but here, alive, in love. The ceremony was held at an estate just outside Asheville, North Carolina. Rolling green hills, stone terraces, white tents glowing with string lights. Everything was perfect, almost painfully so. Sebastian waited at the altar, seated in a sleek, custom wheelchair. He wore a charcoal suit, black shirt, no tie. His salt and pepper hair was brushed neatly, his eyes unreadable behind thin-rimmed glasses. He didn't smile much. But when Amara appeared, walking down the aisle with her foster father on her arm, he exhaled, as if holding his breath for 5 years had finally ended. Guests whispered. Some had never seen Sebastian in person. Others remembered the headlines. Billionaire inventor suffers spinal injury in crash. Tech mogul retires from public life after tragedy. No one expected him to ever love again. And yet, here he was. And there she was. Amara graceful, grounded, a former non-profit strategist who had met Sebastian through a foundation partnership. Their relationship had bloomed not in tabloids, but in quiet dinners, long conversations, and mutual respect. She never saw him as broken. And he had let her in. The officiant spoke gently. Marriage is not the joining of perfect people, she said. It is the joining of two people willing to grow, to bend, to forgive, and to believe. Vows were exchanged. Sebastian's voice was calm, steady. I cannot promise ease or answers or strength every day, he said. But I promise honesty and a heart that will never give up on you. Amara blinked back tears. She responded, voice soft but unwavering. I didn't fall in love with a man in a wheelchair. I fell in love with a man who chose to keep living when everything told him not to. There was silence, and then applause, gentle, heartfelt, real. After the kiss, after the photos, after the cake, came the quiet part of every wedding, the part where the world faded and it was just two people, alone. The staff helped Sebastian into their honeymoon suite, an elegant, wheelchair-accessible guest house, tucked behind the main estate. Amara followed, her heart full and her chest light. She was tired, happy, hopeful. She stepped into the room and kicked off her heels. Sebastian sat by the window, backlit by the soft glow of a bedside lamp. You okay? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at her, long and quiet. Then he said the 4 words that would change everything. There's something you should know. Amara stilled. He reached down slowly and pressed a button on the arm of his chair. There was a hiss, a whir, and then he stood, not shakily, not painfully, not barely. He stood with the kind of ease that made her stomach drop. He took a step, then another. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Her wedding veil slipped down her back unnoticed. She didn't speak, couldn't. Sebastian stood before her now, not the man she'd helped dress, or push, or lift over curbs, but a man who had walked into this moment with legs that worked and a truth that didn't. I haven't used this chair in almost a year, he said, voice low. I needed it, for a long time, but not anymore. Amara finally found her voice. Then why? She swallowed. Why are you still in it? His eyes flickered. Because I needed to know who would love me when I couldn't walk away. The words hung in the room like smoke. Amara took a step back, Not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Betrayal? Shock? Loss? She wasn't sure. All she knew was that the man she married had just turned their wedding night into something else. Not a celebration,
But a test. You lied, she said. He flinched.
No, I withheld, she laughed. Once. Bitter. That's just a rich man's word for lied. Sebastian's shoulders dropped. I didn't do this to hurt you. But you did, she whispered. Then, softer, and I don't know what that means yet. She turned away. He didn't stop her. Because maybe he knew some truths don't need chasing. They just need sitting with. And on their wedding night, after the music, after the vows, two people who once thought they knew everything about love stood in a room full of silence and realized they didn't. Not yet. Amara didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. The bed was too big, too cold, too empty, even with him just a few feet away. Sebastian had offered to sleep on the couch, not because she asked, but because he understood. Or at least, pretended to. He'd changed into pajamas, turned off the lights, and left her alone in the bed. They were supposed to share a bed built for intimacy, not silence. But silence was all that lived between them now. Amara stared at the ceiling, her fingers curled into the sheets. Her wedding ring felt heavier than it had just hours ago. Its sparkle still gleamed in the moonlight, but it didn't shine the same way. She had married a man she thought she understood, a man who couldn't walk, a man who had suffered, a man who had needed her not just as a wife, but as a partner in healing. But now, she didn't know who was lying in the next room. Around 3 a.m. she got up. The house was quiet. Everyone had gone. Staff dismissed. Guests asleep. The world felt paused. She stepped into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. The coolness grounded her. The silence pressed against her skin. She turned, and there he was, Sebastian, standing in the doorway, fully upright, backlit by the fridge light. He looked like a stranger. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice gentle. She didn't answer, just stared. "You shouldn't have done it," she finally whispered. He sighed. "I know." They stood in silence. Then Amara spoke again, slower now. "Do you have any idea how cruel that was?" Sebastian leaned against the counter. "I didn't think it would be this hard to explain." "You had 5 years to rehearse it," she snapped. "How long were you planning to keep it up? A day? A month?" "The rest of our lives." His jaw clenched. "I planned to tell you, I just didn't know how." "You walked out of your chair on our wedding night, Sebastian." She stepped closer, her voice rising. "Do you understand what that means to me? What that does to us?" "I didn't do it to hurt you," he repeated. "But you did," she said. "And you did it knowingly, willingly, like it was some grand social experiment." He didn't deny it. He just looked away. She shook her head. "I stood beside you because I believed in you. Because I believed in your courage, in your vulnerability. And now I find out the whole time I was the only one showing up real." Sebastian flinched. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "No, what's not fair is you testing my love without telling me I was part of the test," she replied. They both stood in it, the pain, the weight, the thing between them that wasn't quite betrayal, but wasn't far from it either. Sebastian finally spoke again. "I lost everything when I got hurt," he said. "Not just my legs. My identity, my pride, my sense of control." Amara didn't interrupt. "I spent years watching people shift around me, treat me like a child, or a burden. Or worse, a story to be inspired by." He looked at her now. "And then you came along. And for the first time, someone didn't see me as broken. You were just kind." Amara's throat tightened. "But I couldn't trust it," he admitted. "Not fully." "Not yet. I had to know." "And now that you do," she asked, I don't feel victorious, he said. I feel alone. That cracked something open, because she did too. For all the anger in her, all the justified rage, she couldn't pretend she hadn't seen the pain in his eyes. The guilt, the fear that had driven him into secrecy. But understanding didn't equal forgiveness. Not yet. I need space, she said, her voice steady now. He nodded. I'll give it to you. She stepped past him, headed back to the guest suite. Her steps were slow, heavy. But before she turned the corner, she paused. Why me? She asked softly, without looking back. Why make me the one you trusted with this game? There was a long pause. Then his answer came, low and real. Because you're the only person who ever looked at me like I didn't need fixing. She didn't respond. She walked away. But in her chest, something stayed behind, tangled, unresolved, and too loud to ignore. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something older than that. Truth. And now that it had walked in, it wasn't leaving. Sebastian hadn't always been a mystery. There was a time when his life was loud, press conferences, product launches, tech expos with stages bigger than dreams. People had wanted his ideas, his money, his charm, but they never stayed for him. The accident happened on a cold Thursday night in January. Rain, a curve, a slick road. A car flipped 3 times before resting upside down in a ravine. He didn't remember the impact. He remembered waking up, paralyzed, alone. And then he remembered her, Jade Whitmore. She'd been in his life for nearly 2 years. Beautiful, brilliant, ruthless in business, magnetic in public. When the accident happened, she flew in immediately, took over the hospital room, the legal calls, the narrative. For the first 3 weeks, she stayed by his side, held his hand, smiled for cameras, told reporters they'd get through it. Then one night she didn't show up, nor the next. By week 5, a lawyer came in with a letter. She was gone. And so was her interest in being the wife of a man who couldn't walk. It broke something in him, not just his body. His trust. Sebastian told himself it wasn't about her, that she was just one person, not the world. But when friends stopped calling, when investors shifted their energy elsewhere, when his own reflection stopped resembling the man he once was, he retreated. The world saw a man recovering in silence. What it didn't see was a man watching the people around him recalibrate based on what he could no longer offer. For the first time in his life, he wasn't useful. He was inconvenient. A headline, a wheelchair in the background of success stories. And every time someone smiled too wide or touched his shoulder with pity, he wondered, would they still be here if I stood up right now? So when, years later, he did begin to heal, when therapy returned the strength to his legs, when late nights and private trainers helped him take cautious steps again, he didn't tell anyone, not even his closest staff. Not his board, not the media, and certainly not the woman who would walk into his life at exactly the moment he needed her most. Amara, she wasn't like Jade. She never asked about his money. She asked about his thoughts. She didn't pity his wheelchair. She adjusted the table height and kept talking. She wasn't soft in a performative way. She was present, and it terrified him. Because this time, if someone loved him, and he stood up, what if they left anyway? It wasn't a game to Sebastian. It wasn't a test. It was self-protection in its most dysfunctional form. If Amara had loved him knowing he couldn't walk, and then he told her the truth, maybe it would mean she was safe. Maybe she was different. But in trying to protect himself, he had hurt her in the one way she didn't deserve, by turning her heart into a mirror of his fear. He sat alone in the garden that afternoon, the morning sun warming his face, but not quite reaching his soul. He remembered the first time Amara made him laugh, not the polite kind, but a full-bellied, eye-crinkling laugh. She had compared venture capitalists to toddlers with too much candy and not enough nap time. He had laughed so hard he spilled his tea. She had cleaned it without flinching, then handed him a napkin and said, "See, you're still human." Now he wondered if she still believed that. If she saw him now, would she think he was more man or less? The door behind him opened. He turned. Renee Carter stepped out. Amara's best friend, who'd flown in after receiving a 2 a.m. phone call from a shaking, tearful bride. She didn't sit. She crossed her arms. "You broke her," she said without ceremony. Sebastian nodded. "I know. I should yell," Renee added. "Throw something. Curse you out." "You can, but I won't," she said. "Because it's not my place to forgive you. It's hers." He met her eyes. "But I will say this if you ever want her back. Don't explain your pain. Understand hers." Then she turned and walked back inside. Sebastian stayed in the garden until dusk, and when the stars came out, he looked up and whispered to the night, "I didn't lie because I didn't love her. I lied because I did." But love, he was learning, wasn't about testing the other person. It was about being brave enough to be known. And right now, the bravest thing he could do was not hide anymore. 3 days after the wedding, Amara Johnson still hadn't taken off the ring. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't know what it meant anymore. She sat by the window of her friend Renee's guest room, looking out at a quiet street in a quiet neighborhood where normal people walked dogs and watered plants and waved to neighbors they'd known for years. The kind of life she thought she was building with Sebastian. Now she wasn't sure if any of it was real. Renee brought her tea, set it down gently beside her. "You haven't said much," she said. Amara's voice was soft. "That's because I don't know what part to speak from. The bride? The woman? Or the subject of someone's grand emotional experiment?" Renee sat down. "You don't have to speak from any of those. Just speak from yourself." Amara stared out the window. "I loved him," she said. I still do, I think. But I didn't love him because he needed me. I loved him because he made me feel like I didn't need to prove anything. Like just showing up was enough." She exhaled. "But now I wonder, was he ever showing up for me? Or was I just filling in for the last woman who left?" The thought burned. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt true. She wasn't angry that Sebastian had healed. She was angry that he'd healed in silence, then handed her a performance and called it love. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed. A text. "Sebastian. No explanations. Just this. If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. If you don't, I'll wait. Either way, I see you now. Fully." She stared at it for a long time. Did he? Did he really? Or did he just finally realize that his test had cost him the only person who didn't ask for anything in return? That night, she lay awake. Again. But not in grief this time, in calculation. She had questions. And whether they brought peace or more heartbreak, she needed answers. The next morning, she stood outside Sebastian's home. The estate she once entered with hope now loomed like a question mark over her future. The door opened before she knocked. He was there, standing. No pretense, no chair, just him. He didn't smile, didn't reach, just stepped aside so she could enter. They sat across from each other in the sunroom. No music, no interruptions. Just truth. Waiting. Amara didn't waste time. "Was I an experiment to you?" she asked. Sebastian looked like the question had punched him. "No," he said. "Never." "Then explain it to me," she said. "Because from where I'm sitting, you needed someone to prove you could be loved at your lowest, and I was the most convenient candidate." His eyes welled, but he didn't deny it. "I was afraid," he said. "Terrified, actually, of being abandoned again. of believing in something real just to watch it leave. Amara nodded slowly. So instead of risking rejection, you controlled the narrative. He closed his eyes. Yes, she leaned back. That's not love, Sebastian. That's fear dressed up as intimacy. He opened his mouth, closed it. She continued. I didn't fall in love with a man in a wheelchair. I fell in love with a man who listened, who challenged me, who made me believe again. Tears slid down her cheeks. And now I don't know if that man was ever real or just a version you curated to test whether I was worthy. Sebastian stood, pacing. He was real, he said. Everything you saw in me was real. I just didn't trust that it could last. That we could last. Because of Jade? She asked, voice calm. He turned sharply. She held his gaze. You kept her name out of it, but I know. I saw her interviews. I read the old headlines. She left when you were broken, and ever since, you've been building walls shaped like truth. He sat down again. Hard. I never wanted to turn you into her, he whispered. But you did, Amara said. By assuming I'd run. They sat in silence for a long time. Then she said the one thing neither of them had dared voice aloud. You didn't test whether I loved you. You tested whether I was just like her. Sebastian looked broken, but she wasn't there to break him further, just to finally choose herself. I don't hate you, she said. He looked up, stunned, but I need time to love you honestly again. Not through a lie, not through a story you wrote before I even walked in. He nodded, speechless. She stood. This time, it was she who left first. But unlike last time, she didn't slam the door, because this wasn't revenge. This was clarity. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can say in a relationship isn't, I forgive you, or I love you. It's simply, now, I see me too. The house was quieter without her, not silent, not empty, just wrong. Sebastian Cole had built this home to be impenetrable, thick walls, private gates, reinforced privacy in every way. But now, it felt like it had no roof, like something essential had been peeled back, because Amara wasn't there. And her absence wasn't a pause, it was a presence all its own. He still made 2 cups of coffee each morning. Out of habit, one with cream and sugar hers, one black his. He never drank the first cup. He just poured it, watched it steam, and poured it down the sink. Across town, Amara sat on Renee's couch, wrapped in a blanket that didn't smell like home. Her phone buzzed every so often. Not Sebastian, just news alerts, emails, charity updates, the world trying to move forward. But she wasn't ready. Some days, she worked. Other days, she stared at the same page in her journal for hours. She didn't cry as much anymore, but not because she wasn't sad, because sometimes grief settles into a stillness even deeper than tears. Sebastian didn't chase her. He wanted to. He drafted 10 emails. Deleted them all, because for once in his life he realized this wasn't about fixing it, this was about facing it. So he started therapy, not for the optics, not for Amara, for himself. Dr. Eleanor Bridges, a woman in her 60s with a calm voice and unshakable eyes, didn't let him hide. So, she asked in their first session, do you want to feel better, or do you want to get honest? He didn't answer right away, but eventually, he said, both. Over the next few weeks, they peeled him open. Layer by layer. The fear of abandonment, the belief that love must be earned through control, the guilt over using his injury as a shield. He talked about Jade not to blame her, but to understand why her leaving had become the story he told himself about everyone. And he talked about Amara, not as the woman who left, but the one who had the courage to see him for what he was, and still walk away. Meanwhile, Amara wasn't idle. She returned to her non-profit work, quietly. She visited shelters, spoke to young women about boundaries, trust, and the strength in saying no. One afternoon, a girl asked her, "How do you know when someone's really sorry?" Amara paused, then said, "When they stop explaining and start changing." The girl nodded slowly, and Amara realized she'd just answered her own question too. By week 6, Amara started journaling again. Not about Sebastian, about herself. Her dreams, her fears, her patterns. She realized she had spent years believing her love could fix broken people, as if healing others was the price of being needed. But she was more than a savior. She was a woman who deserved mutuality. Not performance, not penance, just presence. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Renee walked in with 2 glasses of wine. "You're quieter these days," she said, handing Amara a glass. "I'm learning to listen to myself," Amara replied. "That's dangerous," Renee joked. "You might start demanding what you actually deserve." They clinked glasses, smiled. And in that small, soft moment, Amara felt something she hadn't in a while. Peace. Sebastian, too, had changed. He moved out of the master suite. Not in punishment, in humility. He walked more. Sat less, not to prove anything, but because he finally understood how long he had been hiding. Dr. Bridges said something that stuck with him. Secrets are survival tools, but once they outlive their usefulness, they become prisons. He had been a prisoner of his own protection. But Amara had given him the key by walking away. One Sunday morning, 6 weeks and 2 days after she left, Sebastian sent one message. No pressure. No explanations, just this. "I'm here, when you're ready." Amara read it. Once, twice, then closed her phone and stared out the window. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to choose between love and herself. Because now she knew. If love was real, it would meet her where she stood, not pull her back into a place she had to shrink to fit. The distance between them had become a teacher. And what it taught them both was this. True love doesn't beg for performance. It asks for presence. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when Amara finally replied. Not with paragraphs, not with analysis, just one line. "Okay. Let's talk." Sebastian stared at the screen for a long time, then stood and exhaled, not relief, not excitement, but something deeper. Readiness, not to win her back, but to show up differently. They agreed to meet in a public space. Neutral ground. A quiet tea house near the park they used to walk through during their early dates. A place filled with soft light, worn wooden chairs, and the scent of honey and chamomile. Sebastian arrived first. He didn't order. Didn't fidget, just sat and waited. This time he knew. The only thing he could bring to this conversation was honesty. Not charm, not control. Just truth. Amara walked in 5 minutes later. She looked calm. Not guarded, but centered, as if whatever came next would not rattle her peace. She sat down across from him, folded her hands, and for a moment they just looked at each other, not with resentment, not with longing, but with clarity. "I'm not here to rewind," she said. "I know," he replied. "I'm not here to fight. Neither am I." A pause. "Then what are you here for?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away, then said, "To listen, really listen. And if you let me, to show you the version of me that's not hiding anymore." The server brought tea. Neither of them touched it. Amara leaned forward slightly. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to answer it without flinching." Sebastian nodded. She looked straight at him. "If I had walked away the night you stood up, if I had stormed out and never looked back, would you have blamed me?" He paused, then shook his head. "No." "I would have deserved it."
Good, she said, sitting back, because for a while I blamed myself. He blinked. Why? Because I stayed long enough to care, but not long enough to fix it.
And somewhere deep down, I thought that made me selfish. Sebastian's face softened. You weren't selfish, he said. You were honest. And I think that scared me more than anything else. Another pause. But this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was necessary. Like air between the waves of something being rebuilt from scratch. I've done a lot of work, he said. I've seen a therapist. I've faced things I should have looked at years ago. He took a breath. I thought love meant controlling the risk of loss, that if I could just test everyone hard enough, I'd finally find someone who wouldn't fail. Amara nodded. And I realized I wasn't afraid of losing people, he said quietly. I was afraid of being seen, and still left. Amara sat with that, then said, Do you know what I feared? What? That I'd give my whole heart to someone who only wanted to see their own reflection in it. Sebastian looked up, pain flickering in his eyes. I see you now, he said, not as a mirror, not as a fix, but as you. They sat in stillness for a while, the kind that didn't demand words. Eventually, Amara picked up her tea, took a sip. So did he. She broke the silence. I'm not saying this means reconciliation. I understand. I'm not saying I'm moving back. I wouldn't ask you to. But I am saying, she continued, that I believe in second chances, earned ones. And you're on your way. Sebastian's voice nearly cracked. Thank you. They talked for another hour. Not about the past, not about the pain, but about books. Work. The way the light came through the tea house window like melted gold. They laughed, gently. Smiled, cautiously. It didn't feel like lovers reconnecting. It felt like two humans, finally standing side by side, not across from each other. As they stood to leave, Sebastian asked, Can I walk you to your car? Amara smiled. Only if you promise not to pretend it's a grand romantic gesture. He chuckled. I promise. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. They walked slowly, no urgency, no destination. When they reached her car, she turned to him. This isn't a clean slate, she said. It's a new page in the same book. He nodded. And I'm grateful for the chance to write it with better ink. She opened her door, then paused. One more thing, she said. What's that? If you ever lie to protect me again. He raised his hands. I won't. I mean it, she added. Love without truth isn't safety. It's a cage with velvet walls. He nodded. Understood. She got in. Drove away. And for the first time since their wedding, Sebastian didn't feel abandoned. He felt seen, held, and just maybe forgiven. It started with a letter, not a text, not an email. A real letter folded, handwritten, sealed in a cream envelope with no return address. Sebastian found it in his mailbox one Thursday morning. The handwriting was unmistakable. Amara. He didn't open it right away. He held it, sat with it, let it breathe in his palm for a full hour before unfolding the paper inside. The words weren't poetic. They weren't angry. They were honest. You asked me once what I was really afraid of. I didn't answer then, but I'll try now. That same evening, they met again. No expectations, no big reveals, just a quiet dinner on the back patio of Amara's rented cottage, string lights overhead, 2 bowls of soup, and the shared understanding that some truths only come when we stop trying to perform healing and start allowing it. Amara didn't waste time. I was 8, she said, when my father walked out. Sebastian looked up. She wasn't crying, she wasn't bitter, just narrating. He told my mum it wasn't her fault, then told me to be strong, as if that one sentence could hold a lifetime of silence. She sipped her soup. And I was strong every year. Every birthday he didn't call, every school event he didn't attend, every time my mum cried in the next room. Sebastian stayed quiet. She glanced at him. So, when I met you, and you looked like someone who needed something not out of weakness, but grief, I stepped in. Like I always had. He nodded slowly. Because helping people made you feel safe? No, she said. Because helping people made me feel needed, and being needed felt like love. Sebastian stared at the table, then exhaled. I was 12 when I watched my mother collapse on the kitchen floor. Amara blinked. She didn't die. But something inside her did. He continued, voice low. My father called it exhaustion. But I saw the pills in the drawer. I saw the way she smiled with her mouth, but never with her eyes. He cleared his throat. She never left, never broke. She just faded. Year by year. A pause. So I told myself I'd be strong, in control. That if I just became successful enough, powerful enough, needed enough, I could keep people from breaking. He looked at her. So when you came along calm, steady, never asking for anything, I didn't know what to do with that. It scared me. Amara nodded slowly. We both mistook our coping mechanisms for virtues. Sebastian half smiled. Turns out perfectionism isn't the same as emotional maturity. They both laughed. Not the loud kind, but the kind that lets some air in. Do you regret meeting me? She asked after a while. He didn't flinch. No. Even after everything? He shook his head. You didn't break me, Amara. You exposed the cracks that were already there. And then you gave me the tools to start filling them. She looked away, not to avoid, but to absorb. You know what I regret? She said. What? That I ever thought loving you meant disappearing myself. He reached across the table. Not to grab, not to pull, just to offer. She took his hand. The string lights flickered above them. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, then settled. The world was still, and so were they. That little boy in you, Amara whispered, who watched his mother lose her spark. He deserved better. Sebastian's throat tightened. And that little girl in you, he replied, who thought being strong meant never asking for anything. She deserved to rest. Silence. But not emptiness. The kind of silence that holds things, that rocks them gently. That says, you're not alone now. They didn't declare anything that night. No reunion, no promises, just understanding. Just the beautiful, fragile moment when two people stop trying to heal each other and begin healing with each other. Later, as Amara walked him to the door, she said one final thing. Next time we fall in love, whether with each other or someone else, let's not bring our past as a test. Sebastian smiled. Let's bring it as a teacher. And that night, in two different homes, with two different stories, they both slept peacefully. Not because everything was fixed, but because, for the first time in their lives, they knew where the wounds had come from, and they no longer defined who they had to be. 2 weeks passed after their quiet dinner. No dramatic declarations, no get-back-together texts. Just a steady unfolding, like spring arriving, not with trumpets, but with warmth that lingers. Amara and Sebastian had started walking together once a week. No agenda, no destination. Just two people in motion, side by side, learning what it meant to simply be. One of those walks led them to an old park bench, the same one they had sat on after their first fundraising gala. Back then, Sebastian had confessed that he hated small talk. Amara had laughed and said, "Good, I like big silence." And they had sat there, silently, for over an hour. Back then, it was rare. Now, it was sacred. On a quiet Sunday morning, Sebastian woke early. He didn't check emails. Didn't scroll his phone. Instead, he walked into his study, opened a locked drawer, and pulled out something he hadn't touched in months. The marriage certificate. His signature. Her signature. A contract written in love, but forged in a lie. He stared at it for a long time, then folded it into an envelope, wrote one word on the front, Amara, and placed it on the hall table. Then he picked up the phone. That afternoon, Amara arrived at his home. She'd been invited, no pressure, just lunch and a conversation. But when she walked in, something felt different. The table wasn't set, there was no smell of food. Just him, standing, holding a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "Sebastian?" He raised one hand gently. "Don't panic," he smiled. "This isn't what you think." She tilted her head. He stepped closer. "I'm not here to ask you to be my wife again. Not yet," he said. "I'm here to give you something I should have offered the first time." He handed her the box. Inside was a ring, but not the ring. This one was simple, elegant, no diamonds, no statement, just a single band of gold engraved on the inside. She read it aloud. "Your choice. Your time." Tears welled in her eyes. "This isn't a proposal," she said softly. "No," Sebastian replied. "It's a correction." He pulled the envelope from his pocket. "I filed to annul our previous marriage, legally, fully. It's already in motion." Amara blinked. "I don't want a love that began with paperwork and pretense," he continued. "I want a love that begins when you're ready, not when I'm afraid." She sat down, stared at the ring, then looked up at him. "This is real," she whispered. "It's the first time I've known how to make it so," he said. They sat in the living room for hours. No pressure, no plans, just memories and hopes. She asked him if he missed being married. He said, "I miss being known." She nodded. "I miss being safe without shrinking." They clinked their tea mugs together, like glasses of champagne. To peace, to patience, to the kind of love that didn't ask for a mask. That night, Amara placed the ring in a dish beside her bed. Not on her finger, not yet. But close, close enough to remind her that this time it would be her decision. In the following days, word quietly spread. Not tabloids, not gossip. Just a few mutual friends who noticed that something about them had shifted. There was no Instagram post, no announcement, just two people returning to each other. Step by cautious, sacred step. 1 week later, Amara invited Sebastian to her apartment. He brought no flowers, no grand gestures, just himself. She opened the door wearing jeans, no makeup, and a cotton t-shirt that read, "Love grows in honesty." He smiled. "Nice shirt." She grinned. "It's vintage truth." They cooked together, laughed over burnt garlic, talked about small things, grocery lists, playlists, memories of rainy days. At one point, she reached for a bowl on the shelf, and as she stretched, Sebastian instinctively stepped forward to help her. But she waved him off playfully. "I got it," she said, and he smiled. Because this time, he believed her. After dinner, they sat on the couch, knees touching. She turned to him. "I'm not saying yes," she said. He nodded. "I'm not asking." She held up the ring. "But I'm keeping this," he laughed. "Fair. And if you ever lie to me again," she added, mock serious, "you're buying me a house with a pool." He raised his hands in surrender. "Deal." The TV played softly in the background. But neither of them were watching. Because sometimes healing doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with presence. With the simple, powerful act of trying again, but better. There were no string quartets, no diamond chandeliers, no dramatic floral arch that cost more than a year of rent, just a garden, a wooden bench, and a handful of people who knew the truth and had loved them through it. Amara Johnson didn't wear the original dress. That one stayed tucked away, hidden in a box in Renee's attic, a reminder of a day that looked perfect, but wasn't real. This dress was simpler, off-white linen, no train, no crystals. It didn't need to shine. She did. Sebastian Cole stood under the old oak tree in the backyard of his childhood home. He wasn't in a tux, just a navy blue blazer, open collar, and shoes he wore on purpose because they let him walk. No one stared this time. No one whispered, "I didn't know he could stand," because now everyone knew. And more importantly, everyone saw. There were only 15 chairs. Not one of them was for show. Each seat was filled by someone who had held a piece of the journey, friends, mentors, even Dr. Eleanor Bridges, who sat with a soft smile and proud eyes. Renee stood beside Amara, bouquet in hand, blinking back tears. "You sure?" she whispered. Amara nodded. For the first time, yeah. The officiant wasn't a stranger, not a polished voice from an agency. It was Mr. Harold, Sebastian's former high school teacher, a man who once told him, "What matters most isn't how far you go, but who you walk beside." Now he cleared his throat and smiled. "We're not here because things went perfectly," he began. "We're here because when they didn't, these two didn't give up." The vows were written in silence, spoken without scripts. Sebastian went first. "I used to think love was something you had to earn," he said, voice steady, "but you showed me it's something you give, freely." "Even when it's hard," he looked at her. "I promise to never hide behind fear again. And if I ever forget how to walk through something, I promise to ask you to walk with me." Amara's eyes shimmered. Then she spoke. "I used to think love meant carrying everyone else," she said. "But you showed me it's okay to be held too." She took a breath. "I promise to stand beside you not because you need me, but because I choose you. Every day, without pretense. Without performance, just truth." They didn't exchange new rings. They used the one he gave her during the first proposal, the one engraved, "Your choice. Your time." Now it was their time. There was no cheering when they kissed, just applause. Real, steady, warm. And in that moment, surrounded by old trees and people who knew the whole messy truth, it felt like enough, more than enough. The reception was simple. Mismatched chairs, fairy lights strung between trees, trays of home-cooked food, laughter, storytelling. The kind of music you don't dance to, you sway to. Amara stood barefoot by the garden path, her heels long forgotten. Sebastian joined her. He offered his hand. She raised an eyebrow. "You trying to redeem that first dance?" He grinned. "No, just making it honest this time." They danced. No spotlight. No crowd circling. Just them. And this time, when he held her close, there was no secret between them. Just breath, just presence, just belonging. Later that night, as the last guests left and the candles burned low, Amara and Sebastian sat on the porch swing, the same one his mother used to read on when he was a child. He looked at her. Still scared? She nodded. "But not of you." He waited. "I'm scared of how real this feels," she said, "because for the first time, I'm not waiting for the shoe to drop." He touched her hand. "That's because we took the shoes off," she laughed. Cheesy. Truthful. They sat in silence, watching fireflies blink across the lawn. No need to plan tomorrow. Tonight was enough. Because this time, they hadn't just built a wedding. They had built a foundation. No walls, no masks, just two people choosing each other, with both feet on the ground. The sound of sizzling eggs and soft jazz filled the kitchen. Amara stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, hair up in a loose bun, wearing one of Sebastian's oversized button-downs. She hummed along to the music, spatula in hand, while the smell of rosemary and garlic danced in the air. It wasn't a honeymoon, it was a Tuesday. Sebastian walked in, still towel drying his hair. He leaned on the doorway, watching her. Did we just become a regular couple? She smirked. Define regular. No paparazzi? No emotional declarations, just eggs and a woman stealing my shirt. She turned. Correction, your wife wearing your shirt. He smiled. Better. They sat down at the table, mismatched mugs, linen napkins, sunlight pouring through the window. No cameras, no scripts. Just two people learning to love. Daily. The weeks that followed their second wedding weren't magical. They were meaningful. They fought over closet space, took turns with laundry, argued about who left the light on in the hallway. But they also walked together every evening, even if just around the block. They said, I'm sorry, without ego, and I forgive you, without delay. They didn't promise forever with grand gestures, they chose it with little ones. Amara went back to work at the foundation, not as the CEO's wife, just as Amara respected, capable, trusted. Her co-workers welcomed her without the whispers. Because this time, her story wasn't a headline, it was hers. Sebastian surprised everyone when he accepted a university teaching role part-time. Introduction to Ethical Design. He said it was time to pass something down that didn't live in patents or profit. The students didn't care that he once built billion-dollar platforms. They cared that he listened, that he asked questions instead of pretending to have answers, that he walked into the lecture hall not to impress, but to connect. One evening, they hosted dinner for friends, nothing fancy, just food, candles, and laughter. Halfway through dessert, Renee raised a glass. To Amara and Sebastian, not because they figured it out, but because they stayed in the room until they could. Everyone clinked glasses. Even Dr. Bridges, who rarely toasted anything. After guests left, Amara stood at the sink, rinsing dishes. Sebastian came up behind her, arms sliding around her waist. Remember our first dinner party? He asked. You mean the one where you burned the risotto and tried to pass it off as smoky? Artistic char. She laughed, leaned into him. I'm glad we're here, she whispered. So am I. That night, lying in bed, they talked about future things. Not 5-year plans, just little dreams, maybe a garden, maybe adoption. Maybe a cabin in the mountains. They didn't need to do everything, they just needed to do it together. Amara looked over at him. You ever miss the chase? He shook his head. I don't need to chase anything anymore. I already caught what matters. She smiled, tracing circles on his hand. They fell asleep without saying goodnight, because in their new rhythm, peace said it for them. Months passed, then seasons, and life, as it does, unfolded. Amara's mother got sick. Sebastian had surgery on an old injury flare-up. The non-profit lost a major grant. But they didn't fall apart. They leaned in, took turns being the strong one, took turns holding each other through the storm. On their first anniversary, the second one, not the first, Sebastian gave Amara a framed photo. It was of them sitting on their porch swing, unposed, unaware, just being. At the bottom, etched in small script, it read, not perfect, just real. Amara teared up, because that was the vow they had kept best. And so the story didn't end with fireworks. It didn't need to, because fireworks burn out. But the steady light of two people choosing each other day after messy, mundane, magical day, that's what lasts. There are few things more sacred than honesty, and few things more painful than discovering love was built on a hidden truth. The Husband Who Could Walk is not just a story about a secret. It's about what happens when people stop pretending, start listening, and choose to love not out of fear, but freedom. For many older viewers, this story is a gentle reminder. Love doesn't need to be perfect, it needs to be real. It's not about saving someone or proving loyalty through suffering. It's about showing up every day with vulnerability, honesty, and presence. Amara and Sebastian's journey teaches us that healing doesn't come from erasing the past, but from understanding it. That trust isn't restored by apology alone, it's rebuilt through consistent truth. In a world that often values appearances over substance, their story invites us to believe in second chances, not because people deserve them by default, but because they've done the work to become someone worthy of it. Because at any age, the bravest thing we can do is love without hiding.